Hello and welcome to my first theme park vlog in my vlog series. This is going to be from Alton Towers Resort in April 2022. This is a theme park in Staffordshire and is the UK's largest theme park. So obviously as any day starts at Alton Towers, we start off with the iconic entrance area with the logo, which got redesigned a couple of years ago for the 40th anniversary. And here is the iconic corkscrews from Corkscrew, coaster that opened in 1980 and closed back in 2008. And there is the entrance area, and then we headed down into Tower Street, which is the retail area of the park. Down there you can see the towers in the distance, and here is the iconic frog fountains, and here is a bit more of Tower Street. You can see very colourful. And then we headed into the first themed area, which was Katanga Canyon, for a ride on Runaway Mine Train, which is the park's Mack Rides powered coaster. And this is such a fun family coaster, one of the best in the UK. And Katanga Canyon is one of the best themed areas, I think. It's got a really nice African theme. So we headed onto Runaway Mine Train, and this has a really good custom layout. It's not like a generic Mack powered coaster. Starting with an upwards helix, going over a bridge, and then down into a downwards helix. Up down into another downwards helix, which goes into a tunnel, which you get one of the best moments of interaction in the park, where you go right past the Congo River Rapids. And then you head back up past the queue line into the station. And obviously, because this is a family coaster with a relatively short layout, you actually get 2 laps on it. So we go into the helix again. And it is one of the best family coasters in the UK. It's such a fun ride, and it has some really good elements to it. And in fact, when we went on it, because it was the first ride of the day, we actually got 3 laps on there, because sometimes when it's quiet you can get an extra lap, which is always really good fun. That's the end of Runaway Mine Train. There it is, just pulling back into the station. And then we headed on to what is of course my favourite coaster in the park, the beast that is Nemesis. Obviously this is a B&M inverted roller coaster, opening back in 1994 and is still going strong. Of course it is having a major retrack, which means it's going to be closed for the whole of the next season, and I want to try and get on this as many times as possible this year, because I'm really going to miss it next year. It's such an important attraction for the park, and it'll feel weird without it, but the work is needed. And of course it follows a very terrain-based layout, and it follows the terrain a lot during the layout. Obviously it's got 4 inversions, a corkscrew, before going into a helix, and the second inversion, which is a 0G roll, before going into an overbank turn, the third inversion, which is a loop, before going into an upwards bank turn, then back down through a little cave, and then into another corkscrew to end the ride. And it's quite a short ride. That's the one thing that is a downside to it, but I do think it's a fantastic and unique experience. And the helix is so forceful. It is one of the most forceful elements on a ride that I've been on. Such a good element. And obviously that corkscrew, this first corkscrew, is quite an iconic shot of the ride, and so is that loop. And obviously the station building is themed to the Nemesis Beast, and it's a very well themed station area. And here is my on-ride photo from Nemesis, and then we headed on to a retro squad ride actually, Funk and Fly. I love Funk and Fly. It may not look like much from off-ride, but it's such an intense experience. It can be very whippy, and once it gets up to speed you get a lot of force on there, and you can really feel it as well. Obviously it has the ability to angle both ways, so that provides a very steep banking on it, which is a very intense sensation. It's a very forceful ride. There's a lot of lateral G-force on it, and when it banks each way you really get swung to the side and you really get whipped over, and you even get a bit of airtime on it sometimes. It's a really good experience, and I think these retro squad rides, yes, they are temporary funfair rides and they don't really all fit into the areas, but they are fantastic rides. And obviously this is Funk and Fly, which is the paratrooper, and it's a PWS ride system as well. And they're obviously most famous for making the Sizzler or Twister attractions. And you get a lot of near misses on this with the operator's booth as well, which is always fun. Obviously it's suspended in the gondola as well, and you can swing. So if it ramps up, you can swing almost into the one in front, which is always quite an intense sensation. And it's a relatively long cycle. It does bank both ways, and it's just an overall really fun and very intense experience. So that was a quick review on Funk and Fly, one of the retro squad rides. Then we headed on to another roller coaster, Galactica, and this is of course the B&M flying coaster, which has got some really cool sci-fi theming on it, very much like the sci-fi theme. I really like it. Obviously this used to be known as Air when it first opened in 2002, but it got a massive upgrade in 2016, being rethemed and renamed into Galactica. Obviously the layout of Galactica starts with a downward right drop, heads back up, and down a drop, following the hill down, and then through that space portal. Then there is a fly to lie into a bank turn, which is a really odd sensation, but I really like that. And then the lie to fly into a tunnel. And the layout of this, it's so smooth, so relaxing, so comfortable, and it really flows nicely. There's no real snappy transitions on it, it's just a really smooth and enjoyable ride. I really like Galactica, I think it's quite underrated. Obviously it won't be the highest ranking in the park for me, but you do get to take in the views quite a lot because it's not the fastest ride. but it's just so smooth and I really, really like it. Obviously the station building also contains the roller coaster restaurant as well. There's a lot of rock work on the outside of the station and around the entrance. And it's not the most overly themed ride, but it works. It has a really sci-fi theme to it. And then obviously you get lifted back up into the seated position. And then we headed onto the Blade, which is the Huss pirate ship. It is a decent ride, this. It is quite a small pirate ship actually. But it has a pretty good swing to it. It doesn't really go fully vertical, but you get a decent bit of airtime on it. Obviously it is the oldest ride in the park, which is quite impressive. And it is a classic, Alton Towers. It's definitely one you've got to try out, but it's not that intense really. But there is a decent bit of airtime on it. As it really gets going near the end of the cycle, there's a lot more airtime, and I found that this time I went on it, there seemed a lot more airtime. But I do think there are better pirate ships, but obviously the reason to do this one is because it's such a classic. It is the oldest ride in the park, opening back in the 80s. And obviously this was the final ride we did in Forbidden Valley, meaning we had done every ride in Forbidden Valley by this point. And that's the end of the cycle on the Blade, so it is quite a fun ride. And then we headed back to Katanga Canyon to do the other ride in the area, Congo River Rapids, the Intamin Rapids ride. And it's a pretty fun ride actually. You don't get too wet on it anymore, but obviously it is still quite fun. It's very more scenic now than intense. You sometimes get a light sprinkle on some of like the larger waves, but I hadn't been on this for years, so that's why I wanted to check it out again to see what it's like. There's a lot of rock work surrounding the trough. There's a few tidal waves. And it heads through the trees and obviously follows the same African style theming as the rest of the area. And it also interacts with the mine train, which I've always really loved. These two rides are fantastic moments of interaction as it passes underneath it and goes through the same tunnel as it as well, same cave. And you can get similar moments of interaction to those on the mine train. And it's a very unique element, that tunnel. It's not something you see on many rides, to have a moment of interaction inside a tunnel. Obviously the helix of it just passes by Congo River Rapids. It is a fantastic ride. It is more scenic, but it's a good family attraction. Now there are a few really good waves on it, Obviously, like the one next to the restaurant is a really, really good wave. There's quite a few of them in a row. But there's no real major drops on it because it is a very terrain following rapids ride. But you don't get that wet on it anymore. You just get a scenic tour with some African theming and some rock work, and obviously going past Mine Train. Obviously getting a light sprinkle every now and again, or depending on where you're sat, or it's one of those rides where it's a different experience every time, because you could be really soaked one time and then really dry the next, but a lot of the time nowadays you don't really get that wet on it. And obviously nearing this final turn you actually head right past Wickerman, so you can get some interactions with Wickerman as well, GCI Woody. There's a few more waves as well just as you're heading around that corner. And then obviously you come right by Wickerman and you get some great views of the lift hill. You can also see the Wickerman in the distance as well. And then obviously to end the ride you go into quite a wide area of the trough before getting sent up the lift hill back into the station. And then we headed into another themed area, which was Mutiny Bay, to have a ride on one of my favourite roller coasters in the park, and that is of course Wickerman, the world's first roller coaster to fuse wood and fire, and it's such a unique experience. Obviously the coaster features a lot of bank turns and obviously airtime moments. Of course, it heads through that iconic Wickerman structure as well. And of course, this is the newest coaster in the park, only opening in 2018. And obviously, it starts by heading through a tunnel with some fire effects in, and then you head up the lift hill, which passes by a lot of the coaster, and obviously the rapids just next door as well. And the first drop, the first part of the first drop is actually through a tunnel, and it has some smoke effects in it. And the first airtime hill down into the S-bend is also through a tunnel, before a left bank turn into the Wickerman structure, a right over bank turn, a couple of airtime hills into the Wickerman structure before another right bank turn, into a left bank turn, and then into a right turn past the queue line, down the drop into an airtime hill, through the Wickerman for the final time before a right bank turn, a left bank turn, and then into the brake run and back into the best themed station in the UK. It is such a good station. Obviously there's a lot of fire effects inside, a lot of smoke effects, and obviously it features that wicker effect throughout. pulling into the station, there's some smoke effects as well. And here's my photo from Wickerman. And then we headed all the way down to the entrance area, and that is for Spinball Whizzer, which is a pretty good family coaster actually. I think it's another really underrated one. And obviously this is a Mara spinning coaster. And this is quite similar to Wickerman, how it's quite an action-filled ride. There's no real areas of just waiting, you're straight through all the elements. Obviously this features a horseshoe, which can actually be quite an intense element as you're going over the top. And there's a lot of brake runs on this as well, just because of how many trains there are. There's quite a lot of whippy turns and another horseshoe. And obviously there's a helix as well. There's also a helix right at the start of the ride. And then to end off, you get another downwards bank drop straight into the final brake run, which obviously runs parallel to the queue, and then heading in back into the station area. And obviously this coaster's not really in a themed area, it's kind of on its own. And here is my photo from Spinball Whizzer. And then we got the sky ride over to the world of David Walliams, so I could check out Raj's Bouncy Bottom Burp, obviously formerly known as Frog Hopper. It's a very small drop tower, and I actually really enjoyed it. Obviously it is one of the smallest rides in the park because it's in one of the kids areas, but I really enjoyed it. I actually got a decent bit of airtime. There's a lot of bouncing at the top of the tower, and it's not the longest cycle, but it's quite a fun ride. Obviously it is a very small drop tower, just opposite Gangster Granny the Ride. And this actually originally opened in 1999 as Frog Hopper. I think it did move locations a couple of times, and then obviously it has been rethemed in 2021 to Raj's Bouncy Bottom Burp, which is a really, really good theme. It really suits the area well. Obviously Raj also having a gift shop in the area because he's the news agent in the David Walliams stories, and he's actually the only character that's appeared in every book. So that is Raj's Bouncy Bottom Burp. Then we headed to the Alton Towers Dungeon. Now it's quite a controversial on this, because for me, my overall opinion is that it's just fine. There's not any redeeming features, it's just fine. It is an upcharge, and I don't think it's worth it, even for annual pass holders. Of course, the first scene is the judge. Pretty standard judge scene. There's a decent bit of theming in there. What I did notice is that the judge scenes are normally quite large rooms, and the judge is normally quite high up, and a lot of other people have picked up on this. The judge is actually quite low down in this, and the room is quite small, which feels a bit odd for a judge room, but the actor in there was really good. And obviously, as usual, they did pick 3 people out for a story about a crime, and it was fine. And then we headed to the Black River, of course using the former Charlie and the Chocolate Factory boat ride system. And this was not a great ride. There is too much blank space, and yeah, you get the odd jump scare in there, and that's about it. There's a lot of black walls. So much space from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory boat ride could have been used, but it just wasn't. It's just so much blank space in there. There's a first jump scare which did get me, where there's like a guy hanging from the ceiling. It's quite a scary one. Obviously there's various bits of torture equipment. There's not really a story. It's supposed to be set in a sewer and you're getting tortured in there. And there's various of water effects where there's water dripping down, so you get a bit of a light sprinkle on there. But apart from that, it's just blackness, dark lighting and black walls. There is a jump scare with a guy in a cauldron. Again, it's just fine. And there is a section of the ride which is like a mirror maze. That was in there in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and that is still there. There was a projection screen in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that's actually still used as a different projection now, with a guy being hanged and tortured, obviously. And there is a jump scare at the end of the ride with a guy in a cage and the fence comes up. And then you head through a little ivy covered tunnel into Traitor's Welcome, which is like an offload show. So it's for basically the 3 boats that people have to get on, because they're small boats, because they're originally designed for a different ride. It's a show to pass the time of waiting for everyone to get off the boat. I didn't actually mind that scene. Obviously the station area for the boat ride is quite minimal. There's still a lot of blank space in there. And obviously then into the torture, which is probably my least favourite scene. Very standard. It's always the same script in the last 3 I've done, which is Warwick Castle, London and Alton Towers. They've all had the exact same script, where obviously he demonstrates all the torture equipment, and obviously the reason really I didn't like this scene is because the back wall is just completely painted black. There's absolutely no theming on it, and because you're standing up, that is really noticeable. Obviously the same, someone gets in the chair, someone gets in the cage, and he demonstrates the equipment. Then we did head into a unique scene which wasn't actually that bad. It was the highwayman Dick Turpin. Now you actually get into a bar themed environment for this one, and the barmaid goes through how Dick Turpin is going to arrive, and it's quite similar to Sweeney Todd in London Dungeon. And you actually see Dick Turpin through the windows, and then all the lights go off. It's quite similar to also the second Dick Turpin room, because you've got the surrounded audio, and as a final scare the seats will drop back. Then there's the Plague Doctor, which is again pretty standard Plague Doctor. Obviously you get the sensation under the seat, which is the leeches. That's what that's to represent. It's not that badly themed either, because you're sat down, you don't really know that there's just a blank wall behind you, and also some of the walls are covered by like these curtains with like blood on them. Also the wax figure in there is also a lot more realistic as well than some of the other dungeons. And then we headed into the best scene of all, Molly Lee. Now this scene is absolutely terrifying. So obviously there's a legend about Molly Lee, and all the children in the area sing Molly Lee, you can't catch me. And then all the lights go off, all the pots and the pans start moving and vibrating, all the shelves collapse as well, and the light starts moving across the table, and then Molly Lee comes out, and she's scary because she was right in my face when the light came on as well. So overall the dungeon is just fine. There's not really anything bad, but it's just not worth an upcharge really, but it's Merlin, it's kind of to be expected. And then we headed on to Rita. which is the launch coaster. It was actually my first time on this. So heading through that launch, very intense launch, takes your breath away, over an airtime hill, and then round a bank turn, over another airtime hill, and then a final bank turn, before another airtime hill into the brake run. And Rita's very short, very fast, 61.5 miles per hour is its top speed, obviously heading into that acceleration, 2.5 seconds. Really, really good coaster. I actually enjoyed this, and it is quite controversial that I did love this as much as I did, but I do think it is a fantastic ride in obviously the Dark Forest themed area, next to 13, and it's a very good ride, obviously themed to a racetrack, which some people say doesn't fit in the area, but I think they've actually managed to blend it in really well. And here is my photo from Rita. Then we headed on to 13, the Intamin multi-dimensional coaster. This actually opened in 2010 and was known as Secret Weapon 6 when it opened. And it features a kicker wheel lift hill, and the drop on this, if you're near the back, is so intense that you really get pulled down. And then on the front as well, you get a lot of hang time. I'm normally quite near the front on this. There's a bit of airtime through the forest, some airtime moments. Obviously this is very wooded area of the park, so it does have a lot of airtime moments through the forest. Some near misses with the trees, and then the second lift hill, and of course into the drop track, which was a world's first 12 years ago when it first opened. And obviously you head through quite slowly, and there's some theming, and then all the lights go off and you drop down and the light comes on. There's actually a wraith that lights up, and then you come down backwards, and if you're near the front you really get dragged down that into an underground helix, and it's just pitch black, you can't see anything. Such an intense element, and it is quite a short element because obviously you head back out just underneath the lift hill into a switch track where there's a couple of wraiths standing by the side of the track, and then the track switches over and you go back down through a small tunnel and then into the station area. And obviously the station is really well themed as well. In the queue you've got the Tesla coil that goes off every 13 seconds. So I really like 13, and obviously here's my photo from 13. Then we went down to X Sector and we went on Oblivion, which is another ride. I think this is really underappreciated as well. It is a very short ride. Obviously it's just a drop, really. It's just a vertical drop that's, well, it's actually 87.5 degrees when it was built, whereas on like newer dive coasters, B&M dive coasters, they actually have like a fully vertical drop. But I love Oblivion. It's one of my favourites. It's such a good experience, very unique experience as well. And obviously that holding brake just above the drop, that's a very intense moment, just looking down on the whole area. And you drop down into the black hole, and a lot of the drop is actually in that black hole. There's a lot of mist as well inside, and then you just head up into the brake run, and you get some nice views across the forest as well. And that is pretty much Oblivion done with. It's a very short ride, but it's a good ride, and it's definitely a one-trick pony that's worth doing. And this was Secret Weapon 4 when it first opened. And here is my photo from Oblivion. And then we went back to Nemesis and Wicker Man at the end of the day. So we just wanted to end the day with a couple of re-rides on a couple of my favourite coasters. Obviously starting with Secret Weapon 3, Nemesis. Obviously this is my favourite, so I had to give this another ride, especially because of that re-track coming later in the year, next year. Because it was quite late in the day when we did Nemesis the second time, it was very intense. It definitely sped up during the day, so that meant the elements were a lot more forceful, like that Helix, which is the most forceful element on the ride. And obviously it was a fantastic experience. Nemesis always is. It's always a really good ride, and it is world famous as well. It's one of the icons for the park. And obviously that is Nemesis finished into the brake run and into one of the best themed stations in the country. And then we headed back down to Mutiny Bay to have a final ride on Wicker Man, just to end the day. We wanted to have another ride on this world-class roller coaster. Obviously this was also known as Secret Weapon 8 during the construction. It is by far the best themed coaster in the UK, with that huge Wicker Man structure, and the station building is also extremely, really well themed. And similarly to Nemesis, this had also sped up a lot during the day, because it was the last ride of the day, so it was at its fastest speed. And some of the turns can get very whippy on this, especially when it's been running all day. It's a lot faster. You can get some really whippy elements on here. And obviously going through the Wicker Man, there's some fire effects actually inside the Wicker Man. There's some screens in there, but there's a lot of smoke, so it feels a lot more like real fire. And then obviously you've got on the sides of the Wicker Man, you've got the actual big fire blasts that come out when you go through the tunnel. And this is also a world-class experience. And obviously is the newest coaster in the park as well. And it also features a fantastic pre-show with the Wicker Man, and there's a projection mapped Wicker Man head in there, and obviously you've got the good side, the man's face, and then it fuses into the evil side of the Wicker Man, the ram face, and it's really good effects. There's some smoke, and obviously there's the whole story. So that wraps up the vlog from Alton Towers in April 2022, and it's a really, really good park. Obviously it's the largest in the UK and is my local Merlin park as well, so it's really great to just be able to come down and get on some of my UK favourites.